This is Paul Jonathan McGuire, and this is take 2. It's going to be the last take. I don't care what happens. All right, so we're going to go through a little slideshow presentation with some talking points about a product that I'm developing called SarniaVR, built in Unreal Engine. It's a virtual reality platform. And the pilot project is Sarnia itself. And underlying the construction of it is a bunch of really great tools that I'm hoping to open up to the rest of the world. All right, so SarniaVR, what is it? Well, it's a virtual reality. You know what a virtual reality headset is. Simulation of Sarnia, right? Okay, so you put the headset on, grab the controllers, you walk around. It's to scale, everything that I've completed. The geographical data was combined in Blender. I love Blender. It's open source, okay? I use Swoops as a wonderful Ontario resource for cloud data, LiDAR. And finally, OpenStreetMap, which imports directly into Blender, which turned out to be the more useful solution in the end. But what I was trying to do was maintain more of the unusual topography of Sarnia downtown, which undulates in all kinds of unusual ways that I think I may have missed had I gone with more of a grid city generator approach. So it uses a low polygon design approach. So I'm sure you've all seen Golem wandering around in Lord of the Rings. Well, that's a really high quality mesh. That's some incredible materialing. That is the work of professionals. Okay, that's not entry level stuff, but you can see that in video games now. Again, not entry level, but you find that in VR, there's a lot more to the experience now that you've sort of got people in a universe that you can get away with more expression and less high definition, if you will. So I took that approach. One, because I'm green. And I haven't done this before, and it's a massive scope, but my brain's good for that. But I also had to make sure that whatever I was doing, I could teach, and that whatever we were doing could be upgraded later. So the low polygon approach, which is, a good silhouette of, say, a mailbox or a tree or a car, but then again, not super high definition. The mapping is done quite simply, but well, and we do teach that, good mapping is always a good skill, and try to minimize the amount of faces. So just good habits from the start, and again, any of these shapes could be revisited later in a more advanced modifier standpoint, but as far as teaching and getting this off the ground, I think this is a great approach, and I think the style of it actually translates and looks pretty cool. And once again, you'll see, it's easy to replicate. I keep forgetting that I have published the Git and anybody can download and get this running. So I'll try not to spend too much time talking about things that you'll eventually just be able to see on the headset, and I won't waste any of our times. All right, so let's move on. All right, so as I mentioned, it's a collection of open source tools. Now, what are these tools? Well, let's think about the story of a city. Let's think about the streets. Let's think about buildings that were there and weren't there. Let's think about deaths. Let's think about successes. And let's think about all of the things that make a street that you walk down in a community that you live in different from just walking down any old street, or from even looking at it on Streets or Google 3D, right? So how do you do better than just really accurately scan data, which is, once again, what I think Google and Apple and everybody, they're going to give us a version of what I'm talking about here, but I really don't want to leave it to them to culturally interpret Sarnia. I don't think it'll ever be as accurate, but so I'm making a series of tools that allow a large MySQL database to hold vast amounts of readily updatable information from multiple great sources in the community into a system that keeps generating new ways to get at that information through quest generation, a default layer of, layered education from grade 1 to grade 4, just default stuff that can be mixed in. So at the end of the day, you could be moving around in SarniaVR and find yourself accidentally learning, all of a sudden clicking on a pop-up because you did one thing before, and now you're looking at the old Lawrence house before construction, and maybe you're participating in that in some way. Or maybe you've tripped another trigger, and now you're suddenly actually in 1878, and the whole waterfront is what it was. I actually did design the Taj Mahal, which is a big old people steamer, so that's cool. Whew, almost off track, but not quite. You can read ahead, right? So if you get bored with me, just read. So it's permanent, right? This is always going to be there, hosted by Sarnia, hopefully by ourselves, on servers that we run in the SarniaVR building our office where we've got training, we've got the servers, we've got all kinds of things happening in there. Lots of tech. SarniaVR represents a story-first approach to designing or simulating existing community spaces in virtual reality. This just harkens back to my fear of the future where I'm walking through a meta version of Sarnia. I don't think I need to say too much more than that. Do you want that? I don't want that. Well, I mean, I do want to see that, but I don't want that to be the only option, so here we are. It says that no matter how Google, Apple, or Meta decide to deliver our streets to us in the future, that they are always worth far more than the sum of their scan to those who live there. And that's true. And that's what I was saying, so I don't need to cover that again. All right, so there's no real profit model here. I'm not getting paid to do this. Like I said, some moron had to come up with the big idea and know that there's no way anyone's going to not buy into this, but believe it to be a thing until there was enough groundwork laid to, see it. And that's what I have. And that's why we're here. So a profit model is itself profits by creating new 3D design industry. And it's trained to improve upon itself through community requests for specific additions to specific locations inside of SarniaVR. So if you're a business or the Sarnia Heritage Society, well, maybe you're very interested in adding to a portfolio of virtual reality projects around old locations, specific stories to there. There's also the AG, the Art Gallery, Installation VR, Entertainment. I mean, really take your pick. Live clubs, shows, finding bits of unreleased songs by local artists in bushes in VR Sarnia because that's where that artist wanted to hide them. This is the kind of constant cultural enrichment that will keep feeding in to the system, making it even more interesting and richer. And thereby increase its value and thereby increase people's willing to pay teams that we have trained from all over Sarnia to do this new work in this new industry. And that closes the loop. Around we go. All right. So how does this work? Well, I think I already covered most of that, so we'll skip some of this, right? I've taken the whole map, OSM, I've broken it up into a grid, thinking about how to deploy this from a level streaming system so that we can keep good and high frame rates, while keeping a complicated environment, that's full of rich objects and interactions. I started at the fountain. I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to bother saying that. I started at the fountain with a waterfront walk as the idea for the pilot project, where just from a tourism standpoint, a show of technology, and maybe to get some Sarnians interested was to do a waterfront prototype, just to leave that out there on Steam and just to do a real release. So I did most of that all the way to Vital, and now I've moved even a little further more up to my own block here on Forsyth and Davis. I've gone all the way over to the 402. There's plans to do the golf course separately, Cannon Park, obviously, but mainly the waterfront and downtown, where all the interesting stuff is kind of where I was setting the focus for a longer interaction, like a 15-minute stroll, if you will, with things happening, which we have. All right, each block, physically, like the geometry of each block is an identifiable object, unique, right? And then each building is not only a handcrafted shape by me and hopefully by other people, because again, I'm one guy, this is my interpretation, but that's kind of the point. Walk around SarniaVR as I've made it, point out where I've really messed up, because I'm not from here, not like you guys are. I mean, that's what I'm counting on, is that you'll point out where, hey, that needs to be different, and we can respond to that, and bit by bit by bit, this place becomes impossible to replicate. It's just so Sarnia. Okay. So each block and each address on the block is an actual object that can trigger or tap into the data store. And the Kenwick could ask for information about, hey, do you have any new information about when I was built? I got a guy who's in history mode here. He's answered all the other questions. Is there anything new? And it turns out there was something new added, a story about the Kenwick from way back when. And boom, we supply a question. He gets to answer it. Big fanfare. He earns some sort of a metric. And then, he changes a little bit. And the way he sees Sarnia changes a little bit. So with each block and each location on the block, each one of those can hold their information. The camera can hold all of its stories and history. That block itself can hold stories about how it was built. So all of these individual locations in Sarnia can have individual entries multiple times over regarding anything to do with them, when they were built, what they were built of, a scary story, a surprising secret, a fun fact. All of these things can accumulate over time as people add to them. And then the system redelivers that information as new questing, new quizzes, new ways to find out more about Sarnia in an interesting way. Right, so you're probably wondering, well, how do we feed all this? Well, I happen to be a MySQL addict. I really do enjoy MySQL. I've worked in big data, 200,000-300,000 records at a time, data validation and all of the stress of that. So I'm ready for that part. I've already built this the little server. Basically, we're just starting with quiz questions that'll be tied to longitude, latitude. And then from there, we'll just build on it. I'm just keeping it real loose, but the ideology, as long as it's persistent, will lend itself to the design that's in my mind, and that will come out in production. So it's a gradual, in-step sort of a rendering, like a tide, All right, so, right, covered that, data injection. So also, there's tons of free resources out there for educating kids. There's packets of pre-made questions that meet a grade level. I mean, there's just so much curriculum sitting out there waiting to be utilized, and to feed, again, to create a whole other layer of just feeding all of that educational material back into a data store in a structured way. Teachers could deploy that. We've got a pandemic situation. The school's shut down. It's 12 months from now. There's more VR headsets. We're able to put together a bit of a curriculum that, if you have VR at home, you can jump on here and take care of some of the homework I wanted you to do regarding history of Sarnia, or maybe, a math core algebra arcade session, where you have to do solve for X, but it's in a high action arcade environment where you're literally like creating the numbers you're going to use to make these calculations by shooting them out of the air. So again, a lot of accidental learning. That's one example I keep focusing on, because that's one that I'm almost finished and it's a blast. So I can't wait for you to play that. It's just called Math Block, and he's a pain in the butt. I'll say that, but he's a lot of fun. All right. So who is this for? Well, obviously SarniaVR is for Sarnia. Hopefully, and being the guinea pig, we're going to get all these tools, the underlying tools that make it feel the way I want it to feel, which is culturally relevant and up to date, and very unique to Sarnia. And I want those tools to work anywhere somebody decides to take all of the open source stuff and do it for themselves. So maybe we can leap over to London VR or London, England VR or Guam VR or whatever. But the tools are designed to be taken to other cities where there's someone like me or people who read the playbook and go, wow, I want to start that here. I've got communities of people who can't seem to find a purpose, and what an interesting industry and what an interesting pipeline to provide just access to any minds that may be interested in that where they didn't have access before. So, all right. So obviously for the artists, I think on the back of that, I could say that this is a new medium. So it's a really great opportunity for existing artists and upcoming artists to say, wow, I want to do that and get a grant for it, because you can. So look into that, because it's a new medium and I'm here to try and facilitate that, show you what's possible from a creative standpoint. Like I said, installation pieces, go ahead and, destroy the city in some sort of creative art montage in SarniaVR. We can do that. So for the artists, obviously, I already covered the educators. You can read that. And I already covered the community part. What I will say about the Streets 3D feature is it's just been, I don't throw out a lot. I'm a computer guy. I see a lot of potential in a lot of parts. And I started refurbishing old AMD FX, era computers, with the right RAM. Right hard drive, a nice clean setup, now with Ubuntu Studio, and you can turn them into pretty cool little development machines. So I did my best to scavenge what I could. Dustin Young is another mad scientist in town here, and he actually just threw 3 computers my way that when he heard about what I was doing, he said, yeah, this is exactly where I want to see them go, and you sound like you're going to do it. And I have. So we've handed out 3, and that was just cold calls, running up to people and marketplace. When I sell something, if I feel like there might be something there, I'll just say, hey, have you ever thought about game design? And you know what? It really does work. It catches people off guard. And I would say at least 70% of the time I get, I used to, or I like games or something, but there always seems to be about 6 degrees of separation. And I live in the hood, I guess, Forsyth and Davis. So I get a lot of strange characters around here. And, if you were to meet them once, you'd probably try not to meet them. But when you kind of live in the area and see them every day and watch patterns, as much as they're watching mine, I assume, you kind of get to know who's harmful, who's harmless, and who's just hapless. So out of those people, I've basically been engaging in just cold call conversations about game design. And you know what? It's paid off. I've got, like I said, I've got Ed, or D, he likes to be called. He's got a 16-year-old son. He is going to be ringing me up on one of these social media platforms. He lives on the computer, has a really sweet laptop that he earned, and it looks like him and his dad have a pretty good connection. So that sounds like the start of I don't know, at least an early trainee, a developer, maybe somebody you can get in early and help train others, and so forth. Who else do we have? Like I said, Jason, epileptic. He came up to borrow a cigarette, and I just, once again, cold call. Just, hey, man, just while I got you here. And sure enough, he actually does a lot of character design and does a lot of Frank Frazetta style drawings. A lot of really clean line weaponry and stuff. So I put him to work on coming up with an enemy. Not an enemy necessarily, but basically an entity in the game that could represent uncool people who just want to take without actually doing. People who just want to feed off of the participation of others. So when you're doing something really interesting in SarniaVR, I want that to accumulate in another secret metric. I'm giving away all the secrets here. That attracts these things in some way, and they'll manifest. So I put him to work on thinking of, think politically, think radical. I mean, this isn't meant to be nice, but it's not meant to be needlessly abrasive. It should be relevant. And so I asked him to think very strongly on what he believes plagues Sarnia from his perspective, being both on the streets and off the streets. So I look forward to see what's going to come from him. And again, this can happen anywhere, and that's more or less my point, is that Streets 3D is a cool program. There's gear everywhere. It doesn't take much to put this stuff together and make it good again. And it really doesn't take much to just walk up to somebody and go, hey, do you want to do something new and cool that you've never done before? Most people are into it. So... So again, moving on. I mean, if things pick up, we also have the ability to do our own render farm, maybe, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm running out of power on this iPad. It's kind of turned into a podcast, hasn't it? I'm sorry. You know what I'll do? I'll make sure that the slides I put up are just really extra interesting, and I'll put a little safe to mute on the bottom of the screen. All right, so there's some fun features. I love physics. You can read this. I'm just going to go really quick. The bow's good. I like the bow. I wanted this sort of laser bow thing, not for any particular reason other than doing the live spline physics was of interest to me, and if it happens to ride on the back of a laser bow, well, who am I to judge? But anyways, no, I went back. It's a more traditional bow, but that's a live spline. It's a snap-in arrow system. It's a fast loader. It feels great when you fire it. I got to get some sights on there and adjust the mid shot area. Boomerang was great, getting that to rotate, learning about the boomerang. Now I know people do archery here in Sarnia, so obviously something like this might come off of a archery Sarnia quest. You see what I'm saying? Boomerang, I don't know anybody that boomerangs around here, but I was very interested in the way that boomerangs achieve their turn radius and whatnot, and I wanted to put that into play because I knew that I was going to be doing a frisbee, which is obviously just a more relaxed play on that, and it works great too. Dynamic trees, yeah, Sarnia is a tree community, so this is one of those situations where I'm developing this really great tool for Sarnia because it's a tree community, and unless it's used in another tree community, this might be overkill for somebody and they won't use it, right? So that's where I'm responding specifically to, if you don't nail the trees and the complexities in some way, you're not going to feel like Sarnia. And I know that. And I'm putting that programming into this dynamic tree system that can respond to weather and the seasons. And you spend a lot of time looking at trees, and then you realize how different they all are and like what some of these things are going through. Just trying to get on in Sarnia, the shapes they achieve. Anyways, spline roads, curbs, block generators, and smart street lights. Spline, you know what I'm talking about, right? We stretch a spline out, right? Well, I can stretch a road shape across that and stretch that out as far as I need it. And it's a great way to pull a road shape along a undulating topography and make it look good. And it's easy to edit. I know there were ones out there that I could have downloaded. I realize that now. But because I was doing the bow spline thing, that naturally led me into spline shapes. I ended up doing my own versions for a little while until I realized there is a wrong way to do this. And I fixed that. So, but you can see that in the Git. All right, smart cars, bus routes, garbage pickup. Yeah, absolutely. I've got cars that read the spline locations and find the next spline location. And they've got a basic. I'm not using the two-wheeled vehicle simulator or anything. I want to code actual acceleration engine and all this kind of stuff. So I've got varieties of those doing that stuff. Bus routes, of course you got to have bus routes. I'm probably going to use the bus routes or getting on a bus as part of the go to another location system, where we can skip a level load or a level drive and just put you right at the door of, say, Crossroads if you happen to be down at the grind, and you want to go east. You don't have to walk the whole way or ride the bus the whole way and watch if you don't want to. So, right, Math Cube, Math Block, the Quiz Core, which creates skill testing questions from almost any data entry. So if a kid gets on and tells a crazy story about how he was at school and it's an actual event or something, well, that might be a question that Quiz Core will hack at and see if it can come up with a multiple choice or something. And that'll just immediately become an entity that'll be available at that school or wherever the kid put it, maybe at his house in SarniaVR. I don't know. But individuals will have the ability to deploy their own data notes, stories, quips, that kind of thing, hide them where they want to. Yes, we'll be scanning for swear words and all the necessary things in the background. Don't worry. Of course. Let's see, the expressive dynamic hands. Those are nice. Yeah, I watched a tutorial on how to do that, and then I did the heck out of it. And I've got more to do, actually, but it's pretty great so far. I think they put you more spatially in the area. And again, give you sort of a visual anchor point and a psychological one to help reduce the VR ickiness. Right, so like I said, there's a whole bunch of things that people love to do in VR. I've done most of them, played on the Quest. I see a lot of people spending a lot of time doing the same thing, that programming, spending the same time doing the same thing to solve the same thing. Whether it be a good sword swing or a shield block or an arrow shoot or whatnot. SarniaVR, I'm gathering up the best of what I know is fun, and I'm just putting it all in for us to use, right? If you want to have ping pong at some sort of VR rec center that doesn't exist, that's fine. I've created drum pads with live drum samples at different dynamics, and they work quite well. They've got velocity tracking and whatnot, and I'm deploying those at Crossroads. But this could be deployed as a hand drum somewhere else, or maybe you have to pick up drums over time in order to build a kit, or maybe you and your friends have to meet up because you only have one drum apiece so far in order to have a proper drum session. So this is sort of what I'm talking about as far as intelligent objects that can be reused and redeployed in situations based on what the player's done before and what's new in the data store feeding SarniaVR today when you log in. All right, so let's get on to the problems and schedules. All right, so good news. The Quest 2 went up in price. That means that there's going to be a market stall based on, I guess, some manufacturing, which means, maybe everybody's waiting to see what Apple and Sony are going to get up to here and Google. So it's going to pop sort of all at once. But I think that's still about a year away or a year and a half before there's anything like what I'm doing that might detract from what I'm doing. So that's good news. The plan is still to do the Waterfront promotional teaser, put that on Steam and SideQuest, and get the website up, and then go from there. But if Epic Games, the grant department there, or the Mayor Mike Bradley takes some sort of interest, then obviously we'll be able to change the scope a little bit and see, well, based on who else wants to get involved, what we might be able to also ravel into that early launch to make it even richer and more like what I'm holding, more like what's on these slides. Okay. So for real, my development machine is going to die. It's 8 years old. It's a Ryzen 5 2400G I had every intention of throwing like a 3700X in there, like a 7. Yeah, it just never came around. So anyways, the crashes and whatnot, my God, she has held out. She is a fantastic machine, Bertha. All right, and the final note here is I have a condition called tinnitus. It's severe, cry-worthy, cringe-worthy at times. And I also have a condition called hyperphantasia, which means that I've never had a lot of control over the universe and the visuals and everything else and the chaos of what goes on in my head. And it's just generally always just running on whatever's in front of me. And I think that's what led us to this. So, but I don't want to be on disability. I'm not disabled. So I made something to solve that for as many people as possible. So it's a new industry I'm working on. Something that I can work and teach and play in as well. And this really is the best possible use of me ever. And I hope the Git shows that. And I'm sure Epic will see that. And I'm looking forward to popping a headset on as many people as possible here shortly. But as is, I gotta get back to the work. Thank you.